Hi there. This is Joel Rubenson, president of Rubenson Partners, and you're listening to the Audience Measurement Event Speakers Spotlight Series brought to you by the Audience Measurement Event, and that'll take place May 21st to 23rd in Chicago. For more information on this event, you can go to www.theaudiencemeasurementevent, all one word, .com. So as I said, I'm Joel Rubenson of Rubenson Partners, and today I'll be interviewing Catherine Roe, head of CPG for Google. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome Catherine. Catherine, tell us a little bit about, your role at Google, what you do, and what your responsibilities are, so on.
Hi, Joel. Great meeting you over the phone. I look forward to meeting you in person in May. So what I do is, as you said, I head up CPG, and what that really means is that at Google we are verticalized according to certain sectors, so whether it's consumer packaged goods, retail, travel, etc., because from a selling standpoint and advertising standpoint, we look to be experts in the particular field and to be able to provide that consultative approach to our advertisers as they continue to develop their marketing efforts, especially as consumers are changing. So I work with a team of very smart people who work specifically with our advertisers. So I work with the General Mills of the world, Kellogg's, Procter & Gamble, Kraft, etc., all the big names in CPG. And we work with clients directly as well as their agency partners on helping them solve the connections to their consumers, especially in a digital world. Obviously, we know that digital isn't going to replace TV or traditional mediums, but it certainly is growing in its role as consumers shift their behavior, based on technology.
Yeah, that's great. I noticed as I was looking at the program that your talk at the upcoming IIR Audience Measurement Conference is entitled Engaging Your Target Audience Throughout the Path to Purchase. Now, some in the audience might not be familiar with that term, so can you define for the audience what you mean by path to purchase, kind of bring the concept to life for people?
Absolutely. So I think the path to purchase has existed before we ever started shopping, but I think what's changed and the reason that it's come to the forefront today is that people didn't really think too much about a quote-unquote path to purchase in their activities. It was pretty simple. They maybe saw a TV commercial for a new mac and cheese product, or they saw the circular that came in the Sunday paper with the FSI coupons, and they made their grocery list and they headed down to, in Chicago, Jewel or Dominick's or wherever they might be. But what's really changed and the reason for this quote-unquote path to purchase coming to light is there are so many new stimulations that interrupt today's consumer before she ever makes a purchase decision, whether that be a purchase decision online or a purchase decision as to even which grocery store she's going to go to. So the key piece here is that consumer habits have changed so much. We have so much access to new information because of the internet, because of the web, because of our social mediums that we interact on a daily basis, that our purchase decisions really are affected by a number of different stimulus and different mediums, and it really has changed people's approach to what they buy. Just a perfect simple example is that consumers, like back in the days of buying a car, of course you went to a dealership and of course you test drove the car. And we're finding today is that many consumers are buying cars without even doing a formal test drive. They'll do test drives on video on YouTube, for example. They will research via the internet. It used to be all about a consumer report. Now it's about not only the auto dealership's website, but the vast amount of product reviews and consumer reviews that are out there on the internet. So even if they do go to a dealership, they're usually getting there with 98% of their purchase decision made up ahead of time. And oh, by the way, knowing exactly what they're willing to pay. So a great deal of research is done ahead of time. And as consumers have become more sophisticated in this research, it's translated from big ticket items such as a computer or a car or a cell phone or even a vacuum, all the way down to everyday products like a $3 bottle of shampoo. Will it make my hair frizzy? How will it affect humidity since I'm going on a trip down to Mexico? So those types of decisions are now being researched ahead of time, whereas, even as much as 3-4 years ago, those types of decisions were made right at store level. And it all, everything that mattered was what was on the packaging and the product right there. So that, when we talk about the path to purchase, we really talk about all those moments that matter, as we call them, the moments that matter from the time that she sees some type of stimulus to trigger in her mind that a product is of interest, all the way down the cycle to where she actually picks it up in the store.
Wow, so there was a lot that was in that answer. That's no, it's a great answer, and one of the elements of this that I think would be particularly interesting to people is to think about the fact that there's a digital component to the path to purchase for many shoppers. Even though the products that they're buying, they might not be buying online, they're still engaging in digital activities in this pre-shopping phase.
Mm-hmm.
So CPG mostly is not bought online, but there's still a lot of activity that goes on by consumers and shoppers in this pre-shopping phase. So obviously, if you mentioned automobiles, you mentioned CPG. There are different types of products within CPG. I imagine that there's a wide range of levels of digital activity that occur across these different product or service categories, which would then suggest that marketers really should try to measure the relationship of consumer activity in digital space to purchasing and the relationship of different media touch points to different stages in the path to purchase. So what media measurement approaches would you propose? How would you suggest to an advertiser that they try to quantify these connections of media to this path to purchase?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I think that quite honestly, Joel, has been the biggest challenge. Marketers for years have been able to associate or correlate the value of their GRP or their TRP or their TV spot and correlate and model out the lift that they're going to see in, off the shelf based on the TV creative and the scores ahead of time and everything like that. So they have figured out how TV and how most of the traditional media correlates to that purchase at the shelf, even though there's not an exact linear equation that she saw the Downy TV commercial on TV on Monday night, and when she shopped on Wednesday, she bought Downy because of the TV commercial. But the fortunate thing is that marketers have figured out that correlation. Then you start throwing digital and all these additional touch points that I talked about into the mix, and it's not as easy because they don't necessarily measure and correlate exactly the same as a TV TRP. So I think the way we like to at least coach advertisers through it is to think about what all these the moments that matter are on the way to on the path to purchase, and think about them as KVTs, or key valued tasks. And to be able to associate a value to every one of those tasks or every one of those media moments that hits her in the path to purchase. So as one example, I work with an advertiser that leverages a lot of online recipes as far as a way to engage consumers, because they know that if their ingredients are used in a recipe, then that consumer is that much more apt to go to the store and purchase that specific ingredient for their recipes. And through this key valued task type of thought process, they've equated and they've modeled out for their group that 1 out of every 10 recipe views, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a recipe download, but that recipe download might be given even a higher value, but 1 out of 10 recipe views correlates to an actual purchase in the store. So by doing that, they're able to back into the math that says, okay, if I get 10 visits to my site and they view a recipe, then the value of that is X because the value of a purchase of one of these ingredients in the store is X. So, so if that makes sense, that's what advertisers need to do today to say, what is the value if somebody visits my website? What is the value if somebody downloads a coupon off of my website? What is the value if someone downloads a recipe? What is the value equation if somebody clicks on a click-to-call type of advertisement on mobile? So just being able to identify along the path to purchase, it's not as simple as the TV commercial and the offline media and then jump to the store shelf. There's media points all along the way, and it's translating the value of each one of those points.
I see. So if we were to try and analyze these key value tasks, is that what you call them? Key value tasks? So there are key value tasks that occur in, you'd mentioned automotive. There are key value tasks in automotive, and there are key value tasks in CPG and different, types of products in CPG. Do you have any kind of a rough rule of thumb of the relative degree to which key value tasks are driving purchases for CPG versus other product categories, or any rule of thumb of what it is this year versus what it was 2 years ago and what it might be 2 years from now?
Well, I can answer that a couple different ways. In the case of CPG and food specifically, we know that searches on Google.com related to recipes are up 38% in 2011 over 2010, and it's a huge number. It's 7.8 billion recipe-related searches on Google.com.
Did you say billion with a B?
Yes.
Wow, that's a big
I know,
number.
isn't it huge? There is more searches, just to give you a perspective, there is more searches around food and recipes than there is travel, beauty, luxury, that type of thing. It is absolutely huge. I mean, to put it in perspective, the iPad or, her computer or her phone has replaced her cookbook. And she's still looking for that. In fact, she's looking even more because it's so easy. So, so she's doing that research ahead of time on Google and then going to either a recipe site or a food site or whatever it might be to get the tips, to get the health information, to get the ingredients, to get everything she needs. It's really become a pretty simple task. So we know that searches in general are growing. We know now that 20 to 25% of searches on Google.com, whether it's food or anything, are coming from.
Wow.
And a lot of those searches, it's huge. And a lot of those searches are incremental, meaning she didn't just turn off her desktop and move to her mobile phone. She's, I use she, I also mean he too. We as consumers are constantly connected. So in the past, maybe she was on her desktop and looking over her lunch hour for what am I going to make for dinner Wednesday when Ray and the kids are coming over. Well, now today she's at a stoplight and she's doing it, in her car. Not when she's driving, but when she's at a stoplight, And so it's this always connected. And we find that the usage on iPads then even creates another new moment because iPads, anything the tablets, they spike in the evening from 7 to 10 o'clock. Okay, so a time where she used to be actually down because the mobile phone was put away and the desktop was at work. Now she's back online and she's doing that same type of research. So the amount of searches, the amount of research, the amount of time spent online is only increasing because the moments to be online are there. So I'm dancing around your question. So to get back to in a nutshell, we know that the recipe searches, we know that searches in general are only going up. And the other thing we found, Joel, is that when we did a third-party study, and you mentioned ZMOD earlier, which is, the zero moment of truth that we've coined, which is this activity that is done after there's a stimulus, whether it be a TV commercial or some type of offline media, and in between that stimulus and in between the store shelf, there's this pre-research that she's doing, and that's what we call the zero moment of truth, because it happens before she gets to the shelf and even before she gets to the actual grocery store. And so the study that we did with Shopper Sciences, they asked a panel of 2,000 plus participants, and it was CPG, but it was also retail, grocery, travel, etc. And we asked this panel questions around what made you decide to make a certain purchase. Was it something offline like a TV commercial or a circular or a billboard? Was it something that you did online, whether that be search, go to a website? Was it a display or packaging in the store? Or for an online purchase, was it something that you saw once you got to the website? And then lastly, what we call the second moment of truth, which is when you got that product home, did it meet your expectations? So there's these 4 moments of truth, which used to be 3, now 4 moments of truth that truly matter in this whole path to purchase cycle. And what we found is this 0 moment of truth, as far as having a bearing on the actual purchase, in most cases had just as much influence as that TV commercial or that offline stimulus, as well as that first moment of truth. So back to your original question of, is the digital side of things, is the research they're doing pre-store, is it important, and should advertisers be concerned about it? Absolutely, because the feedback we get from consumers based on this third-party study is that 0 moment is just as important as the other 2 moments within that cycle.
So I have a number in my head, as I've done research in this area too, and I agree with everything that you've said so far. I have a number in my head between 0 and 10 about where 10 is all the way to bright, of how far along CPG marketers are in general at getting what you've been talking about and actually acting and spending their brand building dollars based on kinds of principles you're talking about. What's the number that you would have in your head in general? I know obviously there's a wide range from the least sophisticated to the most sophisticated manufacturers, but between 0 and 10, how sophisticated would you say CPG is at harnessing these powerful principles you've been talking about?
I'd love to be more generous, but the best I can do is about a 3.
I gave him a 5. I gave him a 5.
Oh my God! So you were generous. And the only reason I say that, and I'm probably not as
3 is I get you. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm the eternal optimist, and so I would have loved to give them a 5 plus. Part of it, I think I'm a little bit jaded because I've been working in this space for 5 years, and I came from CPG. My background was actually working for a CPG company, and I worked in retail, so I get it. I just would have thought that if you look at just the charts about how much the consumer has shifted their time off of traditional media and onto online, and I'm correlating my 3 based on what we see as far as shift of media dollars. And I would have thought that progressive marketers would just say, we got to follow the consumer. P&G always talks about the who and what the who is and what the who is doing, and General Mills calls them their brand champions. I just would have thought that if you start with the who and the consumer and you watched how their habits have changed so dramatically over the past 5 years, that you naturally leaned into this medium and continued to test and shift. But then if you look at where the dollars are still spent, you'll see that isn't happening. And I'm not talking just Google. I'm just talking the whole shift to digital in general. It's shifting. It's definitely increasing. But if you asked me 3 years ago where it would be today, I would have thought it would have been dramatically higher, quite honestly. Now, there's some advertisers that are out there and really are, pushing the envelope on this. But the majority, and a lot of it is cultural, they still fall back on what they know. Even if intuitively I don't want to crash the plane or sink the ship. So the next brand manager, when I rotate off in 18 months, he can make the decision to, jump off the ledge and see if this digital stuff really works. Now, right now, most of them do enough to say, hey, I'm testing in digital, but there aren't too many that have really, in masses, followed that consumer. in my opinion. But I'd love to hear your opinion on it too, because I think it probably come from a little bit different reference point.
Well, I'll ask you one more question, and then we can discuss some of the data that I've seen in the space. But it's not gonna be too different from your opinion, I'm sure. But okay, so you gave manufacturers a 3. What do you give? What do you give grocery retailers?
You know what? I would score them a little bit higher. I would probably put them to a 5, maybe even a 6. And again, it depends on the particular retailer, but at least I do see them doing things such as, SMS to the phone from Target for coupon offers. Not fully targeted yet, but at least they're making an effort there. Macy's, full circle as far as incorporating a wallet type of initiative and circulars and understanding that even if the vast majority of their sales are still coming at brick and mortar, that they are doing more online to stimulate that consumer enthusiasm and do some things in that space. I know Lowe's and Home Depot and bigger box retailers have done more in that space, and I think the retailers have been pushed harder in a call to action because they're competing with the Amazons and Walmart.com to a certain extent, but the Amazons online, if they don't get into that space, then their dollars are going to shift more into an online world. So I would give the retailers a little bit higher grade, and I think a lot of it is just because they have to. They have to in order to compete.
Yeah, I'd say I think your scores are very reasonable, and I think that one reason for it is possibly because CPG advertisers have an anonymous relationship by and large with the consumers who buy their products, whereas retailers have to build relationships with individual shoppers who are their customers or their guests. Different retailers call them different things, but they know that these people are coming to their websites to look for deals or to go to the store locator page. So I think that the functional purpose in digital is more evident for retailers, but that doesn't mean it's more important for retailers. It's just retailers have been impelled to understand this a little bit quicker. But I'll say that the work that I've done in this space, you could just put in search terms like dinner idea and think of all the advertising that should be showing up, all the paid search that should be showing up that doesn't. And you could look at a place where a conversation occurs about, dinner or healthy lifestyle, like on a WeightWatchers.com, which takes advertising, and it's amazing how many retailers and advertisers don't advertise in these places where there's an organic congregation of consumers looking for advice. So so I think your 3 and your 5 are completely accurate, and hopefully it'll be a call to action for people who are less less sophisticated than they need to be. One other question I have, and maybe this puts you in a little bit of a difficult situation. You could take a pass if you like, but if people you've mentioned search a number of times in terms of this pre-shopping research that people do at the 0 moment of truth. How would you relate the relative importance for a CPG marketer of, say, mastering search versus mastering social media? Can you say one is more important than the other? Are they equal? Are they synergistic? How would you relate those concepts?
I think they're both important, and I can't really say one versus the other. I think your word synergistic is the right way to think about it, because I think they used to be somewhat mutually exclusive. I was either searching and I had something in mind that was, healthy lunchbox snacks, and I'm in one mode when I'm searching, and I might be in a different mode more for entertainment, say, if I'm on my Facebook page. And so it's more about social. And then in that case, I might ask my friends for, hey, got any healthy lunchbox snacks? So you could be looking on, your Facebook or your Google Plus or your whatever, you dig your social network for ideas and influences for the same type of topic from your friends. as well as from the universe on search. But where the lines are starting to blur is now with the social implications that are coming into search. And, and this is public knowledge, but a lot of the plus ones and the likes and the ratings, the reviews are playing into your actual search results, whether it's in a paid ad or in an organic ad. And at Google, we've found that the influence from somebody that you know that is in your social circle is extremely high, right? So if you see an ad for fruit roll-ups, for example, and you are logged into Gmail, Google Plus, any Google property, and you see a +1 there from somebody you know, that has more influence for you than any message you'd get from the brand itself or somebody unanimous that you don't know. So the social influences that are, kind of the whole umbrella effect that are weeding more and more and more every day into Google are going to continue to influence click-through rate on organic as well as paid ads, as well as influencing all the way to path to purchase. So, in answer to your question, they are much more synergistic today than they were even a year and a half, 2 years ago, and that's only going to continue as the web becomes more social. So, back to the original answer, do I pick one or the other if I only have a limited world of funds? You kind of really need to figure out a way to do both. And I think that's what's good about some of the social tools that are available today. They don't all necessarily cost money. There's a lot that you can do on Facebook for free. There's a lot that you can do. Everything you do on Google Plus today, because it's still in its infancy somewhat, is, basically free. And at a minimum, free, put a +1 button on your website so that you can continue to get those types of likes and tallies and social interaction continuing to add up for your products, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I guess we're close to the end of our half hour, but let me ask you one more question. As you evangelize what we've been talking about, as you provide data that's compelling evidence of what we've been talking about the role of digital, and if we can think into the future, let's say 3 years, what is the one thing that we should be able to point to as a change in how CPG marketers are spending their brand communications dollars or trying to build their brands? What is the one demonstrable proof point that we should be able to point to that said, boy, they were listening, they got it?
You know what? I think the biggest challenge to not getting it today is that CPG companies, for the most part, use some type of media mix modeling, and they try to use a square peg round hole effect of just applying the same media mix modeling that they've used on TV, print, radio, and their historical traditional advertising. And to a certain extent, it's worked. It's impression-based. It's worked for even online display advertising. But it's and you'll hear them talk about this. It's not apples to apples, and you really can't measure them the same, especially when you start thinking about what we talked earlier about key value task. But what would be different in 3 years is the CPG companies coupled with the measurement companies, whether that's the Nielsen's of the world, the ComScores, have to figure out the right way to measure these mediums along the same lines, whether that's in one model or measuring different models, so that you truly can get an accurate read of what is the value, what is the ROI I'm getting out of my digital dollar in comparison to my TV or my traditional dollar, that I'm putting into media. And honestly, Joel, I think that is what's missing today with a lot of my advertisers. Some of them claim to have figured it out, but what we have found is that if and when they do figure it out and they actually put enough media in there to warrant a test, because believe it or not, 1% versus 80%, it's not a good correlation to get a good measurement out. But I really think that that's what's going to be the shift in the next, to your point of 3 years, that will move the needle, is how do we accurately measure this so that I can look at a media plan and say, if I have $1 extra, here's where I'm going to put it.
I think that's a great point. I've heard people in the media business say, if you can't measure it, you can't buy it. So
Right.
I think that the measurement challenge is really the critical success factor at getting marketers to really understand how to properly include digital in the mix. And as a researcher and an analyst, I'm happy to hear that sounds like the Full Employment Act for what it is that we do. So that's wonderful.
Yes.
So
Absolutely. It's really critical. It really is. And that's why I'm glad that there's enough emphasis out in the market on that type of thing today, because it is, you can only lean into something, with gut feelings so long before your CFO says, "How did it pay out?" Well, people liked it.
Well, it sounds to me like having a conference that's based on audience measurement, given that the key challenge here is a measurement challenge, certainly seems like it's right on target with what you know the ecosystem needs to be able to move to a different place and a place that's more aligned with consumers. Any parting words, Catherine? Or
No, I think this is great. I really look forward to the conference and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Well, that's great. Thanks so much for all your wisdom and knowledge, and hopefully we've set people off on a different path that's going to be productive for them. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Take care.